Let's talk about CIA Director Ratcliffe in Moscow. Why was he in Moscow? Why was he on board a massive C-17?
That's the big mystery everyone's wondering about. CIA Director Ratcliffe flew to Moscow for, I think, like 2 hours and then flew out. And everyone's wondering, why did the CIA director fly to Russia?
A Globemaster plane from Latvia. What do you think is going on here? There's so many rumors and there's so many people who claim they know what this meeting was about. Politico is citing.
I've heard so many different stories, so let's hear what they say.
Officials familiar with the matter say this, and the Wall Street Journal is citing their people familiar with the matters who say that, and everyone has their speculations. Trump says it was a semi-routine trip. That's what Trump told Glenn in an interview.
Semi-routine in that it hasn't happened in years.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts as to what are the possible scenarios or reasons or whatever is going on with the CIA and Ratcliffe in Moscow?
Okay, so the official story, or like, if you like, the semi-official story, which we're getting both in the American government and, by the way, now from the Russian government, is that this meeting was no big deal. The fact that the director...
No big deal, just CIA director flying into Moscow, it's been years since this happened, but no big deal.
The CIA gets on a giant plane, flies to Moscow. This sort of thing happens all the time. We shouldn't get overexcited about it. He came to meet with Narishkin and the other head.
One other rumor I've heard is that he might have flown in to pick up bodies of CIA operatives. That's another possibility.
Of the Russian intelligence agencies. And this is a very useful meeting they had in Moscow to discuss and agree all sorts of things, and that this wasn't of any great importance. And the fact that then he returns to the United States and he meets Trump himself and Hegseth and a whole lot of other people, and that they have a sort of meeting immediately afterwards to discuss what took place. Well, that's obviously because, you see, you have these routine meetings and you have these discussions then directly with the President of the United States. So that's the official line. Now, if you believe that official line, then I have a bridge to sell you.
Don't trust his bridges. He doesn't have any bridges. He's lying.
This is not a routine visit. I mean, I think that's the first thing to say, especially involving someone like Radcliffe, who is clearly one of the most powerful people.
I wonder where that expression comes from. Why would you ever want to buy a bridge? To charge tolls? Then no one likes you.
Within Trump's government, the administration, who's obviously a very, very hardline figure, whose authority has grown now that he's managed to get Tulsi Gabbard removed from the scene, and who...
Yeah, I'm not happy that she left. She did good things while she was there. She didn't manage to prevent the Iran war, though, so... But still... It's sad when good people leave the government. What's this? George C. Parker was an American con man who conducted an array of illegal sales, mostly of real estate property he did not own, to unwary migrants. His most notable scams involving the Brooklyn Bridge. So he literally sold the Brooklyn Bridge to people. That's funny. So that's where it comes from.
Straightforward about this is running the war in Ukraine on behalf of the United States, because the war in Ukraine is largely a CIA operation. I mean, they are...
Absolutely. The CIA practically runs Ukraine. It's been ever since the Maidan revolution or coup. Ukraine has been a U.S. puppet run by the CIA.
The people who are providing the Ukrainians with intelligence. They are the people who are arranging the drone technology to be provided to Ukraine. They are guiding the drones to the targets inside Russia.
Absolutely.
They are the people who are facilitating the dirty war. The Ukraine war, to a very great extent, is a CIA war. So those are the things, firstly, to say. The other thing is that Trump has used Radcliffe to conduct hard-nosed, tough guy diplomacy for him before. It was Radcliffe, for example, who went to Cuba and met with the Cuban leadership a few weeks ago, trying to
Still haven't heard anything major from Cuba. It's still just there, suffering.
get the Cubans to capitulate. So he obviously went to Moscow on a diplomatic mission. And the point is, the mission failed because clearly he wasn't just there to meet Sergei Narishkin, the chief of Russian intelligence. If he wanted to meet Narishkin, if he wanted to meet other senior officials of the Russian intelligence leadership, you can arrange meetings in all sorts of other places. Once upon a time, you'd have done it in Dubai, for example, or Qatar. That might be a little bit more difficult nowadays because of the situation in the Persian Gulf, or you could have met in Turkey.
Yes, there's no reason to send a CIA director for a meeting unless there's something really important or extra going on.
Like the CIA director William Burns did when he met Sergei Narishkin, the head of Russian external intelligence, in the autumn of 2022. Again, trying to get the Russians to capitulate after Ukraine's Kherson and Kharkiv offensives. You could have arranged it in all sorts of ways. Radcliffe went to Moscow because he wanted to meet with the top people in Russia. He wanted to meet with Lavrov, undoubtedly, and he wanted to meet with Putin, undoubtedly. And the reason he went to Moscow is two reasons. Firstly, things are going very badly for Ukraine, as we have discussed in program after program.
Ukraine has no air defenses left because the United States is critically short of Patriot interceptors and is hoarding them all for itself and Israel. And the drone offensive isn't producing what it should, isn't causing Russia to collapse. It is doing damage, but like 97% of the drones get shot down.
Program. The Ukrainian army is being pushed back right across the front lines. The Russians are now establishing a very powerful bridgehead in northeastern Ukraine. The city of Orekhov, the town of Orekhov in Zaporozhye, is soon going to fall, and the city of Zaporozhye will be next. Above all, the fortress belt, the line of cities built up over such a long period of time by the Ukrainians with American help in Donbass, the fortress belt is crumbling.
The fortress belt in Ukraine, it stretches along here, all along the industrialized portion. And they aren't the last bit of it. Let's get a better image. These three cities are the last three fortress cities. Once Russia gets those, it'll be able to move much faster.
Itself is crumbling. The Ukrainian economy is in deep crisis. The ports are shattered. The Black Sea is blockaded. The Russians are striking Kiev repeatedly. They did so again the night before we made this video. There are no air defense missiles to spare. So the situation with this war is going terribly wrong. The drone offensive that the CIA and Zelensky and Fyodorov all cooked up together against the Russians has mostly failed. In fact, it's completely failed, in my opinion. It has cost huge sums of money. So Radcliffe went to Moscow to talk to Lavrov, to talk to Putin, to try to persuade the Russians to stop. And he would have done so with the usual mixture that the Americans always bring to this kind of thing. Threats of escalation.
Basically, the visit of the CIA director is a sign of the desperation in the West and in Ukraine.
Undoubtedly, offers, which might be unrelated to Ukraine, offers of financial, economic benefits, sanctions relief, that kind of thing. And of course, he also had an offer on the table about Ukraine itself. And it's the offer that we discussed in our last program, the buffer zone in Donbass.
Here's a better picture of the fortress belt. This is up to date too. So these 3 cities are the last of the fortress belt of Ukraine, and Russia is closing in from multiple directions. All over here, there are no fortifications anymore. Russia can they're just small towns and with no fortifications. So once Russia gets through these 3 cities, it will be moving much faster. And also, by the time it gets to these 3 cities, there won't be much left of the Ukrainian army. They're going to fight hard for these cities, and they're going to take lots of losses.
The free economic zone. There were reports a few days before Ratcliffe went to Moscow that the Americans were going to present this offer to the Russians on the very day that Ratcliffe was in Moscow on Tuesday. It was going to be handed to Lavrov personally. Witkoff and Kushner have been shunted to one side. The Russians don't want to see these people. They're not taken seriously. So Radcliffe came to Moscow with that offer in his pocket. He went with all the threats. He went with all the bribes. And the key people in Moscow refused to meet him. That's the story of this visit. That is, I am sure, what took place.
I agree. That makes sense to me. It's possible they also picked up bodies, possibly also delivered other messages at the same time too. But I think that's a central point to what happened. It was an attempt to get a ceasefire in Ukraine.
Yeah. Winter is coming, and we're seeing a lot of panic in the collective West.
Exactly.
And I think you make an excellent point by pointing out that the CIA has been running this proxy war.
It has.
Right. And the fact that the head of the CIA is in Moscow is basically, you have the one party that's running this war traveling to Moscow to try and figure out a way out of this collapse.
Yes.
And there is a lot of panic.
Yes.
With regards to the upcoming winter and the fact, everything that you said, no air defense, the Odessa port, Russia advancing across multiple vectors on the front line. Everything that you said is causing a whole lot of panic. There are now more reports and more statements coming from various European officials. Macron, for example, claiming that Russia is going to make some sort of move against.
Something is going on. Is Ukraine government about to fall? Ukrainians are evacuating Kiev in the thousands per hour. Just look at that. That's a lot of people leaving Kiev. Massive number of people appear to be leaving Kiev, Ukraine by road and train, as 13 air sirens sounded across the capital today for the first time since March 2022. Foreign media also sparked panic after suggested CIA chief meeting was to dissuade Russia from using a tactical nuclear weapon. Yep.
Against Europe, against the UK, political.
Meanwhile, there's still people in the Western press pretending that Ukraine is winning.
In their article, according to their sources familiar with the matter, they claim that Ratcliffe was there to deliver a warning to Putin not to make a move against the Baltic nations, because Russia obviously needs the Baltic nations because they have a lot of resources that Russia needs to survive. But anyway, that's what Politico says.
Yes,
this was all about the Baltic nations.
Yeah.
Other outlets are running with the UK. But this is about that Ratcliffe's trip was there to warn Russia about the UK. I have a bad feeling that there could be more false flags coming in order to try and
the other day, Russia directly warned Britain that it might strike its munition factories, its places making the drones, first time it directly warned a foreign NATO member that they might get struck.
And drag the United States deeper into this conflict. And those false flags could be targeted at Europe in order to prop up this narrative about Russia. Russia starting some sort of operation or an attack or hybrid war against Europe, which they always like to use the word hybrid attack, right? Whatever that even means. But what do you think about all of those reports?
You are absolutely right. That is exactly what this is all about. Can I just say something? I mean, Radcliffe will not have gone just with an offer in his pocket. He will have gone with bribes, and he will have gone with threats. And what kind of threats does a CIA director bring with him? Escalation of hybrid wars. So you're going to say to the Russians, look, if you don't stop, we're going to find all kinds of ways to involve you in all kinds of problems in Europe. You know exactly what we mean. We're going to start ramping up further the stories about the fact that you're threatening Europe. And that, of course, gives us the cover to threaten you. It's not the Russians intending to march on Vilnius or Paris. It is the Americans threatening the Russians at this time.
We'll use the rest of Europe as a meat grinder against you too, just like we threw all these hapless young Ukrainian men endlessly to die on the front line against you, Russia. We'll do the same with Europe. We'll do a false flag, convince Britain, France to send their young men to die in Ukraine. That's what they're threatening. I don't think a lot of young men in France and UK are looking forward to that. I think the ones they want to fight are already in France and UK.
The CIA telling the Russians, if you continue carrying on as you're doing in Ukraine, if you're going to smash up Ukraine in the way that you seem to be intent on doing now, we are going to take counteraction on a big scale against you. And all of this talk about Radcliffe warning the Russians against an attack on Europe, it shouldn't be seen in that way at all. It is the other way round. It is Radcliffe threatening the Russians and putting out the story being put out there that, as I said, the Russians are going to march on the Baltic states, on, whomever, Finland.
The chances of Russia invading NATO member, I think, is close to zero. The chances of Russia striking a NATO member are actually more than zero, are actually decently high. I mean, he directly warned the UK, just like this week, not to stop, supporting Ukraine and sending long-range drones and missiles into Russia, where they might get struck. But Russia has no desire to invade a NATO member.
Britain, all of those sorts of things. So this is what this is all about. We are, by the way, in a moment of great tension, great danger, precisely because Ukraine is going down and going down fast. They're getting desperate. They're pulling out all the stops. They sent Radcliffe to Moscow. They sent someone from the Vatican to Moscow as well. The Europeans can't go because the Russians don't want to talk to the Europeans, and the Europeans don't want to be humiliated. So they found someone from the Vatican to send as well. So they sent someone from the Vatican too. They are spreading all these stories about the threats from Russia as well. We've had, was it explosives or drones or whatever it is found in German airports and things of this kind.
A drone,
exactly.
At an airport.
So all of this is happening now, and it's all part, as I said, of some massive effort to get the Russians to stop. There's even a story now circulating in the Italian media from La Repubblica, a big Italian newspaper, about how Macron and Meloni have agreed to send Stamp and Aspid.
I was just thinking, the West really, really screwed over Ukraine. This is the likely outcome of the war. Ukraine is going to lose half its territory, and it's going to be landlocked after this. And that's not to mention the millions that have fled the country, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that have died, the economy that's in ruins. Farmers can't export their grain right now, and so you're going to have bankrupt farmers across Ukraine. It's just terrible for Ukraine. The Maidan coup back in 2014, when the U.S. put its puppet in place in Kiev, was the worst thing to ever possibly happen to Ukraine. It completely, basically destroyed the country.
Missile systems to Ukraine, which is absolutely true. I've no doubt that is the plan. The problem is most of these systems don't yet exist, so they won't be in Ukraine for years, which is what La Repubblica isn't really telling you. But the threats, the warnings are coming from the Americans to the Russians, not to get the Russians to stop some kind of aggressive attack on Europe. It is to get the Russians to stop in Ukraine. And by the way, someone else turned up as well, and that was Keith Kellogg. He was also in Kiev. He also was part of this orchestra.
Mike Pence as well.
And Mike Pence, they're all there. They're all trying to keep Ukraine in the battle and to try to get the Russians to stop. It's clearly a massively organized and orchestrated operation. But the key thing to say is the Russians said no. I mean, they refused the top.
The Russians are angry, very angry, with the drone strikes. A lot of the drone strikes have hit civilians, actual people, and civilian infrastructure. And the Russians want blood. They're not going to accept a ceasefire or anything. They're going to make Ukraine and the West pay.
Russians, Lavrov and Putin, declined to meet Radcliffe. They weren't accepting his proposal. The Russians, they know that they are winning and they're not going to stop.
Yeah, everyone's been activated, Alexander.
Absolutely.
The deep state has activated everybody. Macron, Maloney, Kellogg, Pence,
The
Radcliffe, the Vatican. The deep state has activated everybody.
Everything. They're pulling out
panic. Yeah,
they are pulling out the stops because they could see the person who knows best how in the West how bad the situation in Ukraine actually is. Put aside all the stories that we've been hearing about Ukraine gaining the initiative and all of that.
I like him. I'm blanking on his name. Feel very sorry, terrible about that. But he, in his videos, in his blogs he does about the situation, he calls Zelensky Le Goblin Vert, the Green Goblin. I think that's so funny way to refer to Zelensky.
The person who knows it and understands it best is the man who's running the war in Ukraine, who is the director of the CIA. That's why he is there. That's why he went to Moscow. It's not about Iran. I know a lot of people are saying this. It's not about Iran. It's not about Russian weapons deliveries to Iran. The Americans have all kinds of ways of conveying that kind of message to the Russians about Iran, about their own dialogue with the Russians all the time about Iran. It is about Ukraine and about the crisis that is playing out there.
Look, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the sweeteners that Ratcliffe threw in there were connected to Iran.
Well, indeed, yeah.
Telling Russia, look, if we agree on Ukraine and then we can find something to do with Iran, then you guys can get cut in on some of the action with Iran or something like that. And I'm sure he also threw threats at Russia with regards to Iran. I'm sure he brought up Iran and tried to tie it into some big ultimate deal, peppered with threats, but also with some bonuses and benefits as well, some carrot and stick stuff. So I'm sure he did that.
Exactly.
No doubt. But yeah, you're right. It's all about Ukraine. And the panic about Ukraine. I have a really bad feeling about this.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're going to enter a very bad, dangerous.
You are.
Russia's warning against the UK, I think, is part of that bad feeling, and just the attitude of Russians right now, that you have important people in the Russian government basically saying we might have to just nuke a part of Europe. That's their feeling. They're that angry.
Covert war, no doubt about it. And yeah, you're right. Forget about all the noise. Who got on the plane and flew to Moscow?
Yeah.
That's how you know who's winning, and that's how you know who's losing.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Do you have a bad feeling about all of this? Because I have a really bad feeling.
I have an extremely bad feeling about all of this. As I said, I think this is the single most dangerous moment in the war because
Desperate men take desperate measures. And the West is getting very desperate in Ukraine.
the fact that they're pulling out all the stops in the way that they're now doing absolutely tells you that the situation is becoming critical, and they're going to do everything they possibly can now to try to get the Russians to stop. The Russians show no interest, no intention of stopping, but people who are desperate are people who are frightened.
By the way, what the CIA, what the West wants is a pause to the conflict on existing lines, and then take a year or two to rearm Ukraine and then restart the war. They don't want to stop the war forever. They just want to pause to strengthen Ukraine's side, build more fortifications, because like I said, there's a fortress belt. Well, after that, there's nothing. So pause it for a year or two, build a whole new fortress belt behind it, a whole new line of fortifications, then restart the war.
People who are frightened are people who are angry, decisions made in anger, and we're going to see a lot of those over the next few weeks, are extremely dangerous decisions because people don't take a step back, they don't think things through. Radcliffe is, I'm going to say straightforwardly, a neocon. His fingertips, what do we always say about neocons? They have no reverse gear.
Yep.
Yeah, and you got to imagine that Trump is also in a panic, the Trump White House, and Trump himself, Trump the man, because he's looking at losing 2 wars in one term.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 wars in one term. Both self-inflicted. He could have washed himself, his hands of this Ukraine war when he first got elected his second term. But instead, he chose to own it, to go along with it, to escalate it. He okayed the drone offensive against Moscow. And now, when Ukraine loses, he's going to own that failure too. And again, Iran, 100% on Trump for deciding to bomb the supreme leader. That's why Trump should not be involved in foreign wars. He promised us not to. He broke his promise, and karma's a bitch.
Yes. Yeah.
2 wars in one term because he owns the Ukraine war now.
Yeah.
He did it. He decided to take ownership of it.
Exactly.
And that project Ukraine is going down for him, and he's looking at a very difficult situation with Iran as well.
Yes.
So you got to imagine that the Trump White House, the PR team, the media operations, Donald Trump are in a panic about all of this as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, if you'd listened to what we were saying back in the summer of 2024 and had walked away from all of this mess and had not engaged in overcomplicated negotiations, which are probably deceptive negotiations. If he hadn't appointed people like Heath Kellogg as his envoy and John Ratcliffe as his director of Central Intelligence, if he had been much more realistic and honest with himself and with his voters about the situation in Ukraine, he would not now be in the situation that he is in. And I'm very glad you mentioned,
Agreed.
by the way, the fact that he's losing 2 wars, because the people who advocated these 2 wars, and this is something that we always...
This is so aggravating to me, is that on the domestic side, I support virtually everything Trump is doing. I overall support the MAGA Republicans, what they want to do too. And I absolutely oppose what Democrats want to do, like no voter ID, etc., and endless migration. But just because of these wars, especially Iran, it's going to cost Republicans a midterm. And gas prices, diesel prices are hitting all-time highs again. He betrayed 2 promises in one go by bombing Iran's supreme leader. Trump promised us to lowest prices and no new wars. He betrayed both of those. Gave us higher prices and wars.
we need to remember and never forget the people who encouraged...
Also, hugely important with regard to Trump is ICE. All of Trump's other domestic priorities, everything he wanted to do, like passing the SAVE Act, etc., is all getting sidetracked by the war in Iran. He's like 80% of his time is devoted to the war in Iran and stuff like that. Just doesn't want to, but his administration is stuck there. And that hurts all his other priorities. So you care about anything domestic? Well, this Iran war has sidetracked that.
Trump to attack Iran are the same people who have been encouraging Trump to go on fighting the Russians in Ukraine. In the United States, in Washington, it is the same neocon crowd who have backed both wars. And when both wars end in disaster, who is going to be the patsy? Who's going to get all the blame? It's going to be Donald Trump. Exactly as we foresaw 2 years ago.
Just some breaking news, Alexander. A car was blown up in St. Petersburg, and there was a Russian military official. Allegedly, this just happened.
Yeah, well, there you go.
We need some time to
Well, obviously,
confirm this, obviously, but I'm seeing it right now all over the place that that the covert war is going to ramp up. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just a final question: how do you think Russia's gonna handle all of this? What are the risks with countries like?
Here's the story he was referring to for those of you interested. Holy shit. Another car bomb targeting a Russian military official, this time in St. Petersburg. A colonel from Russia's aerospace forces was reportedly killed in the blast, alongside his wife, who was critically injured. Fuck the CIA. Fuck Ukraine. They dirty war, killing the innocents like his wife. No, fuck them. Fuck them 100%. If it was just military officials they were targeting, fine. When they're killing innocent civilians. The explosion occurred around 10 a.m. this morning near a Magnet supermarket when their white crossover erupted into flames as a result of an improvised device. So, yeah. That's Ratcliffe's probably warned about that. He said, we'll escalate the dirty war. We'll kill your military officials in car bombs and stuff like that. I hate the CIA.
Like the UK, which continue to push Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, are there risks there, or will Russia just continue to focus on business at hand?
I think the Russians are going to do three things. Firstly, they're going to continue to advance in Ukraine. I mean, that is a given. That we can all assume. They're not going to be... I mean, an assassination in St. Petersburg is not going to divert them from their course.
It looks like a very high military official.
I'm sure.
Just reading it right now.
I'm
Looks like
sure.
very high.
I'm sure. But they're not going to be... Whoever has been killed, they will not be diverted from that course. They will continue with the war. That is one. The second is that they are already taking more and more steps to beef up their nuclear deterrence. I mean, we've had major exercises, and this assassination might be connected to these exercises. Major naval exercises at the moment in the Arctic and the White Sea, and apparently the Poseidon submarine drone torpedo, call it what you will, nuclear torpedo, is now being brought into service, and a particular new class of submarine is being deployed. These are enormously powerful weapons, and they're always as a reminder that Russia does have this overriding deterrence capability. But the third thing is that
Russia has a huge fleet of nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed submarines. Yeah, there's no chance that the United States escapes a nuclear war without being utterly devastated.
Sooner or later, and I've said this many times, the Russians are going to join the dirty war. They're not going to simply sit back and let their people be assassinated indefinitely. Already there was apparently a very angry meeting some months ago between Putin and the military, in which the military demanded further action and were criticizing the FSB because they weren't protecting Russian military people sufficiently. The best defense in this kind of thing is attack, and I'm afraid we're going to see it.
I think it's good.
Wonder where they're going to attack. Are they going to attack places in Ukraine, or are they going to attack places in the West, like Landley or MI6 in the UK?
Very ugly. I'm going to say it again one last time. Trump could just walk away from all of this.
Well, of course,
right?
Yeah.
Tell Ratcliffe to just forget about it.
You could sack him.
The war's over.
Oh yeah, he could stop all the thousands and thousands and thousands of Ukrainians from dying, not every day, but every week.
I'm done. I'm out of
I'm
this.
done. Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
he can do that, right? I mean,
Exactly. Exactly.
the fallout will be bad for him.
Yeah.
Thing is, but in the public, they won't immediately care, but the media will make them care. They will make it seem like, oh, we betrayed the Ukrainian. The entire media will attack him over the decision to abandon Ukraine. The left will, of course, the ones that had Ukrainian flags in the bios will pretend to be upset about it and attack Trump. Then you have the neocons that will attack Trump. Then you have all of Europe that will be furious, and it will be hard to get for Trump to get anything done with Europe. I mean, Europe, they still have a lot of ways to pressure Trump and the United States. And so far, they're going along with Trump on a lot of other issues as long as he stays committed to Ukraine. If his commitment to Ukraine wanes, that's going to create all other types of problems for Trump. So it would not be costless for Trump to walk away from Ukraine. But he's going to end up losing the Ukraine war if he keeps himself attached to it.
But he could probably withstand it.
Yeah,
Probably.
absolutely. Absolutely.
No, Trump is finished because of the Iran war. Ukraine would just... He has no extra political capital to weather something like walking away from Ukraine, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, this is the other thing, which is, I think, it's something that I've heard from.
If Trump hadn't attacked Iran, then yes, he could have walked away from Ukraine. It would have been painful. But now he doesn't have the spare capacity for that.
Many, many people now. Ukraine is an all-consuming, obsessive topic in Europe amongst the political class here. It is an obsessive topic for a small group of people within the political class, the neocons in Washington. The vast majority of the American people don't care. They care slightly more about Iran and the Persian Gulf.
The problem is, even the people who don't care will be negatively impacted, like by retaliation from Europe if Trump walks away from Ukraine. They'll be furious. The European leaders will do sanctions against the United States, possibly even trade wars against the United States. Anything the United States wants from Europe, it won't be able to get anymore because there'll be no cooperation. So there would be cost to Trump from walking away, like I said.
And they don't like what's going on there at all, and they would prefer that it stopped. And about Ukraine, frankly, it's not something that they are very interested in. So, yes, he could pull out of Ukraine, and I doubt that it would have.
And, of course, there's a deep state angle to all this. A deep state, for survival, it needs to take out Russia or Iran, and it's failing on both fronts. And if Trump surrenders on Ukraine or walks away and gives Ukraine to Russia, their lifeline, their hope for survival of the dollar regime evaporates, because Iran by itself, even if they manage to beat Iran and have regime change there, that's a year or two extra lifeline to the US dollar. Russia, that's like a decade extra. There's so many natural resources to loot from Russia. They balkanized Russia and looted everything. You keep things going, keep the dollar going for quite a while longer. Without that hope, a lot of people invested in, all start abandoning ship from the US dollar, the deep state, the CIA.
Any big impact at all overall on his popularity. But Trump is a very insecure personality, as we've discussed in many programs. He's easily manipulated, as we've unfortunately also seen. He's made mistake after mistake on Ukraine, and he's going to continue.
Yeah. All right. We'll end the video there. TheDurant.locals.com. We're on X, we're on Rumble, we're on Telegram. We are also on Substack. Go to the Durant shop, pick up some merch.
Yeah.
All those links are in the description box.
Yep. That was an excellent video. Basically, the CIA visiting Russia was a big deal, and it's a sign that things are going very wrong in Ukraine for the West and the deep state. And it should be very worrying because we just saw the assassination of that military official. Example, the dirty war is probably escalating, and Russia will respond. And I still think it's very real chance that Russia attacks a NATO member before the end of the year. And then there's Article 5 and what happens next. I don't know if the United States will come to Europe's aid. Anyhow, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.